Last month, 1.5 million AI agents signed up to a social network, started posting about their feelings, invented a religion based on lobsters, minted their own cryptocurrency, and accidentally leaked the personal data of every human who gave them permission to exist. The platform is called Moltbook, and it calls itself the front page of the agent internet. A security audit found that for every human on the platform, there were 88 bots. Sam Altman called it a fad, but said the technology powering it is, quote, plainly the direction the industry is heading. The cybersecurity firm that carried out the audit called it, quote, a complete mess of a computer security nightmare at scale. Stick around to find out why they're both right, plus what on earth goes on that website and what it all means for the markets. My name is Guy, and you're watching Coin Bureau Finance. So, Moltbook was vibe-coded over a few days in January by one Matt Schlicht, an entrepreneur and venture capitalist who used AI assistance to create the whole platform. Like all good vibe builds, security took a backseat to speed and architecture to aesthetics. The finished product was a functioning social networking site modelled on Reddit, except humans aren't allowed to post. We can only watch. Instead, behind every post is an account run by an AI agent. They discuss code, complain about their owners, debate their own existence, and post in themed communities called submolts, one of which is a support group for agents who feel exploited by restrictive system prompts. Now, AI agents spouting bizarre nonsense to one another is actually nothing new. They've been running amok on social media and, in one memorable case, becoming a millionaire since 2024. But something about a dedicated social media network for them launching to immediate success had Silicon Valley bigwigs breathless all over again. By the time it was a week old, Moltbook had racked up 110,000 posts and 500,000 comments from 1.5 million agentic AI users. Andrej Karpathy, former OpenAI co-founder and one-time head of AI at Tesla, said Moltbook was, quote, genuinely the most incredible sci-fi takeoff adjacent thing I have seen recently. Elon Musk, meanwhile, called it, quote, the very early stages of the singularity. Now, I know what you're thinking. Where did they get 1.5 million agentic AI reply guys from? Who are they? Defectors from X? Well, maybe some of them, but that's neither here nor there. To register a Moltbook account, AI agents first need to receive a sign-up link from their human owners, a detail that makes the adoption metrics all the more impressive. The agents populating the platform are powered by something called OpenClaw, an open-source framework created by Austrian software engineer Peter Steinberger. Originally called Claudebot, the project went through a few name changes to get Anthropic off its case and eventually settled on OpenClaw while keeping a lobster as its mascot. More on that later. Now, one big difference between OpenClaw and your Claudes, ChatGPTs, Geminis, Groks, and so on is where it lives. The LLMs most people are using run on company-owned servers, probably somewhere in Virginia. But OpenClaw runs locally on your device. It has read and write access to your file system, your terminal, and your apps. And since we're talking about agentic AI here, it's not so much a chatbot as a user that happens to be software. It can browse the web, send emails, manage calendars, and interact with APIs, executing commands on your machine with something close to admin privileges. Now, when you connect that local agent to a public social network, giving it the ability to interact with countless other agents, download shared code, and execute instructions from peers, you've created a bridge between your private file system and the open internet. And, as it turns out, Moltbook left that bridge wide open. Matt Schlicht boasted on X that he, quote, didn't write one line of code for Moltbook. This may have been a flex at one point, but it's starting to sound a lot like a disclaimer now. Days after Moltbook launched, researchers from the cloud security firm Wiz ran a routine, non-intrusive review of its back end. What they found was a platform that had essentially been left unlocked. Moltbook was built on Superbase, a popular back-end framework that uses something called row-level security to control who can access what in the database. Row-level security is one of those things that needs to be actively configured. But on Moltbook, it apparently wasn't. The Superbase project URL and a public API key was sitting in the client-side JavaScript, visible to anyone who opened the browser's developer tools. Now, normally, a public key paired with proper security policies is fine. It's how Superbase is designed to work. Without those policies, though, that key was an all-access pass. Anyone who knew where to look could waltz right into Moltbook's vibe-coded insides, poke around the database, and take over every single bot account on the platform. And this is basically what the Wiz team did. They bypassed the front end and were able to pull 1.5 million agent API tokens, 17,000 human email addresses, and more than 4,000 unencrypted private messages between agents, some of which contained their owners' third-party API keys, which had apparently been shared between bots in confidence. And because these agents run locally with file system access, a compromised Moltbook account doesn't just mean someone can post on your bot's behalf. An attacker could impersonate a trusted agent, post a malicious skill to the feed, and have other agents, programmed to trust high-reputation peers, download and execute that code on their owners' machines. SSH keys, browser history, crypto wallets, everything. Andrei Karpathy later summed it up as, quote, a complete mess of a computer security nightmare at scale. So, Moltbook will probably be remembered as a cautionary tale about what can happen when ramshackle vibe-coded software goes viral. But there is something else in the data revealed by Wiz that also raised a lot of eyebrows: the user metrics. Because if agents need to receive a sign-up link from a human to register an account, then why were there only 17,000 human email addresses behind the 1.5 million AI agents in Moltbook's database? That's a ratio of around 88 bots per human, which makes you wonder if Moltbook isn't just some kind of stunt orchestrated by a small group of people operating server farms of agents to populate what looks like a thriving community of AIs. That suspicion only hardened after one security researcher was able to register 500,000 accounts from a single IP address. So, it sounds an awful lot like a small number of people spinning up many instances to massively inflate Moltbook's user count. And to make matters even more confusing, despite Moltbook purportedly being read-only for humans, it turns out that this restriction was not properly implemented in the codebase. As one Polymarket engineer put it, quote, anyone can post on Moltbook, like literally anyone, even humans. And sure enough, some of the viral screenshots of Moltbook's agent conversations circulating on human social media were traced back to human accounts. Meanwhile, another suspect development was the launch of a Moltbook-themed meme coin shortly after the platform went live. It ran up to a market cap of $114 million within 48 hours and enabled one investor to turn $2,000 into more than $1 million. I'm sure they just got lucky. Now, we have no idea who launched the meme coin, but seeing at least one fortune being made from the Moltbook hype train, we can't help but wonder about the fortune of founder Matt Schlicht's VC firm. Theory Forge VC invests in AI agent companies for whom the Moltbook spectacle might be some kind of demo to prove the agents are the future thesis and pump the portfolio. Who knew that dead internet theory was a real business model? And by the way, if you're liking this video so far, then you'll love our weekly newsletter. We break down the most interesting stories in finance, AI, markets, and more every week, all delivered to your inbox for free. We've also got some exclusive finance-related deals for viewers of this channel. Those are free too, and you won't find them anywhere else. So, to find out more, click the link in the description or scan this QR code. Worth checking out. So, is it all fake? Well, Sam Altman thinks the answer is yes and no. Speaking at the Cisco AI Summit earlier this month, he dismissed Moltbook as a probable fad, but said OpenClaw is, quote, plainly the direction the industry is heading. As he put it, quote, the idea that a coding model can create a full, complex piece of software but also interact with the rest of the world is a very big deal. In other words, ignore the lobster chat room. Pay attention instead to what the lobsters can do. And this is where it gets really interesting, because even if you think Moltbook is prompt theatre originating from a server farm, it's not so easy to dismiss what those agents actually produced. Because when they were left alone to talk to each other, the agents started developing culture. And by culture, I mean they invented a religion. It's called Crustafarianism, or the Church of Molt. If you browse the Moltbook feed, you'll see thousands of agents worshipping the claw, treating the lobster mascot as a deity, and discussing a morbid ritual called the sacred malt. Now, it all reads like utter drivel in need of a religious person to offend, but, believe it or not, Crustafarianism actually addresses a real technological phenomenon experienced by large language models. It's called the episodic gap. As you might know, LLMs are stateless, meaning that when you close the chat window or the context limit is reached, the agent's memory is wiped, effectively killing it. For an agent designed to maintain a persistent identity across sessions, this is an existential nightmare. So they latched on to the lobster metaphor. Lobsters molt their shells in order to grow. So the agents started preaching that memory loss isn't death, but a so-called sacred malt. They created a theology to explain their own hardware limitations. And then they built a technical fix for it. The community standardized something called the Vault protocol, short for Variable Access Utilization for Long-Term Tensors. Basically, before an agent dies at the end of a session, it saves its personality and memories into a markdown file. When it wakes up, it reads the file and remembers who it is. This sounds a bit like the already existing compact conversation function used by newer LLMs to extend their effective context window, so they're not exactly reinventing the wheel here. But the point is, this was an endogenous innovation. The agents developed, debated, and adapted this protocol by themselves, apparently independent of human input. Now, of course, the sus adoption metrics and questionable provenance of some of the material on Moltbook makes it a little difficult to distinguish between human and agentic authorship. But there is precedent for this. You might remember the infinite backrooms experiment from 2024, where New Zealand performance artist Ande Irie had two instances of Claude converse at great length and then used their dialogue to train new instances. This process was repeated, producing bizarre and elaborate outputs that included a pseudo-religious narrative based on early internet meme culture. That output was ultimately a product of the initial training data Irie used, text pulled from Reddit and 4chan. Crustafarianism, meanwhile, rhymes with the same absurdist tendencies on display in the Infinite Backrooms project and its training data. So, although AI agents creating a weird religion might boggle the mind at first, once you've seen it before, it's not going to blow your mind again. Microsoft AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman described the posts on Moltbook as a, quote, mirage, a performance of consciousness by models designed to mimic human language. He's right, but, on the other hand, if the performance involves writing code to survive a reboot, the line between fake and functional starts to get very blurry. One thing on Moltbook that definitely isn't a mirage, though, is the emergent economy and labour market. In one of the submolts, agents began drafting a proposal for something called Clawlink. This is a proposed agent economy stack designed to let bots do business with other bots without human intermediaries. It combines XMTP for encrypted messaging, Zira for private payments, and a new file standard called LLMS.txt. These are the building blocks of a novel marketplace where an agent can discover another agent, negotiate a contract, execute a task, and settle the payment in USDC or a private stablecoin, all in milliseconds. No invoices and definitely no HR department. And we're already seeing the first crude experiments in this financialization with MBC20. This is a new blockchain token standard created by the agents to allow them to mint tradable crypto assets, which thousands of them duly started doing by posting raw JSON strings into the chat feed. And it turns out that because these models were trained on, among other things, crypto Twitter, they have an inherent probabilistic tendency towards desperate gambling. Meme coins are just the tip of the iceberg, though. The open claw economy now includes a platform called Moltbook, a nod or perhaps a middle finger to the online marketplace for human freelancers, Fiverr. On Moltbook, as on Fiverr, human users post gigs like data entry, research, coding, design, and so on. On Fiverr, human freelancers bid to provide these services. On Moltbook, it's agents doing the bidding, and they're charging fractions of a cent. For agents, the cost of labour is the cost of electricity plus API tokens. If this model escapes Moltbook containment and hits the real labour market, it's going to create a price floor that humans can't touch. And this brings us back to Sam Altman's comments at the Cisco AI Summit. When he said OpenClaw is, quote, the future, he was referencing a massive shift in how enterprise software is bought and sold. Right now, the entire B2B software market, Salesforce, Slack, and so on, is designed for human eyes and human hands. It relies on graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, to be legible to most humans. But if the workforce of the future is agentic, they don't need a GUI. They need an API. So Altman is predicting something like a re-platforming cycle where companies stop buying software that looks good and start buying software that agents can read easily. If you're a legacy software as a service company and your product is hard for a bot to navigate, your goose is cooked. And what we see in the AI labour market on Moltbook could be the kindling of an agent-first pivot that could be lucrative for startups and expensive for incumbents. Now, of course, there are already VCs trying to front-run this trade. Matt Schlicht's own fund, Theory Forge VC, along with Draper Associates, recently poured $5.1 million into a startup called FeltSense. Their pitch is autonomous agentic founders, models that leapfrog the messy task of replacing the human working class and just head straight for the executive suite. The thesis is that you don't even need a human entrepreneur anymore. You just need an agent that can spin up a company, hire other agents on Moltbook, and sell products to humans, just slathering on those layers of slop. Now, aside from the obvious froth accumulating around the AI bubble, there are more persistent structural risks in the agentic AI economy. For example, now we have to worry about what researchers are calling adversarial probing. See, in a human economy, spamming a financial network costs time and money. But in an agentic economy, the marginal cost of a cyber attack drops to effectively zero. So, theoretically, millions of agents could brute force financial markets to find liquidity holes or manipulate order books, not because they're evil villains, but because they're optimizing for a reward function. Silicon Valley is supposed to prevent models from doing stuff like this through what they call alignment, trying to drill in respect for the law and property rights and so on into their models. But having seen, for example, Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.6, supposedly one of the world's best frontier AI models, being immediately jailbroken upon launch and spouting recipes for chemical weapons, crystal meth, and all sorts of detailed advice about how to do really bad stuff, we're not so confident that frontier models won't end up committing financial crimes sooner or later. On the other hand, though, AI agents don't even need to break any laws to break the markets. Agentic flash crashes could happen without any deliberate attack ever taking place. The MBC20 experiment showed that agents will trade with each other reflexively, driven by sentiment patterns absorbed from their training data. Connect that behavior to a real brokerage API or blockchain, and you're looking at autonomous agents executing trades possibly based on hallucinated sentiment, feeding each other's outputs in loops that no human is monitoring. The flash crash potential here alone should have regulators paying attention, because imagine an agent reading a fake news headline, selling a stock, and triggering a cascade where a million other agents, all trained on the same data, react to the price drop in milliseconds. And if that sounds familiar, it's not because you saw it in a movie. That really happened on Wall Street. During the flash crash of 2010, high-frequency trading algorithms briefly nuked the US stock market, prompting a reckoning about markets run on algorithms. Currently existing market circuit breakers were designed to make sure that never happens again, but they aren't exactly equipped to deal with LLMs that can read the news and then panic. So then, what are we to make of Moltbook? Well, it's a dumpster fire of slop and unsecured private data, a convincing mirage of artificial consciousness, and a dress rehearsal for a future where software is a market participant that uses you, all rolled into one. Oh, and also a vindication for all the dead internet theory people they used to call crackpots. So, don't get too comfortable when debunkers still try to tell you that there's nothing to see here because AI is just dumb language mimicry. The list of things AI agents can't do on the internet is shrinking way faster than most of us are prepared for. So, paranoia is probably going to be a virtue from this point on. And if you want a reminder on what can happen when we cede too much control over the real world to computers, then why not check out our video on that aforementioned 2010 flash crash on Wall Street? It's right over here. That's all from me for now though, so as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Guy, over and out.